Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Near Memo. Today with Mike and Greg. David is out, and we're excited to be back. We will be talking about the new Google warning on UK profiles that talks about review fraud. I called it a badge of shame earlier, sort of similar to the Google or the Yelp consumer alert. We'll talk about that, when it happens, and what the process is. We're also going to be talking about Google's second antitrust trial and some interesting related developments. And then we'll talk about agencies and their offerings to local businesses and local business demand for certain kinds of marketing services that's coming out of some research I'm doing in another project that's just interesting. So Mike, tell us about what you discovered in the UK.
Sure. So before I do that, just in David's defense, he's working on the second part of the write-up of the hotel study.
Sure.
So you can look forward to that. He's not just out like at the beach or something. He's actually working and on something productive. So you can learn more about the hotel study and how, as a business, you should be approaching hotels, particularly in Europe, given the realities about consumer search.
I was not trying to imply anything. I was just using shorthand.
Right. So
that's what he's doing, in fact.
Yes. So in July, Google released a help document called Business Profile Restrictions for Policy Violations. This is when it showed up in Wayback Wacky Machine.
And this is the UK.
Well, the help file is universal.
Generic?
It's generic. Does not specify. Okay. However, in the UK is sort of at the leading front of trying to fix fake reviews. And last week we saw for the first time one of the elements that they mentioned as a potential restriction, which was a warning that lets consumers know that fake reviews were removed. So it's a sort of a badge of shame that appears on the business listing after Google has temporarily removed all of their reviews. So and we saw it for the first time. And so this is, as far as I know, the first time that Google has publicly sort of accused a business of participating in the fake review market. Historically, they've had this sort of standoffish approach to this. They might take reviews down, but they would never sort of say who is at fault. But so this new profile restrictions has three levels of restrictions. Level one is a business will not be able to receive new reviews for a set period of time. This is a technique that's sort of at the location level that we've seen implemented previously in fake review attacks, where fake review attack was reported, reviews removed, it occurred again, it was reported, reviews removed. And usually on the third or the fourth attempt, they then prevent any reviews from being left. And so they're now applying that to fake positive reviews as well. So that's step one. And that usually goes away in, like I said, 3 to 4 weeks. Step two of this potential restrictions is existing reviews and ratings will be unpublished for a set period of time. Now, that's new, and we haven't seen that. I think that's what happened in that example I showed. And then step three is a display of this badge of shame warning, where to let consumers know the fake reviews. So this is occurring first in the UK as both, I think, a test, which will likely be rolled out more broadly. And it follows up on the heels of the LSA announcements in the UK to get rid of LSA reviews, consolidate with GPP reviews, require that an LSA listing has a GPP associated listing. And so that's all happened in UK and is starting to happen here.
Right, and that I was just going to say that started in the UK and then it happened here, so we have reason to believe that the same pattern will occur in this particular instance
of review restrictions and stated policy violations.
So one of the questions that came up for me, I wrote about it based on your tweet, and I didn't have a sense of the process that you're sort of outlining here, although not maybe not entirely. Google's review algorithm has often flagged sort of false positives in terms of fraud or suspicious reviews. And
Right.
what I'm wondering is when in the process this badge of shame will appear, because I think that that's a brand killer, really. If you see that, I mean, there's an interesting kind of a irony here in the sense that if the reviews disappear, maybe the rankings are impacted, right? So they might be not as visible. That's a question mark.
That's a question.
And
It's a big question mark, and I don't think
yeah.
Google is that sort of. I don't think they're looking at it that way. I think they're looking at it strictly from the public point of view. These reviews persist in some database someplace, and I would
So
believe that they
maybe
still
they're still influencing rankings then if they're
could
in
be.
somewhere.
And the truth
Yeah.
be told, Joy's research indicated that only 10 reviews was what influenced ranking. Beyond that, there didn't appear to be influence. I have a theory that maybe at a higher number there is an influence, but we don't know. So what
Yeah.
happens first is Google will notify business owners via email if they plan to apply a restriction, and the business is given an opportunity to appeal. If they
Hmm.
don't appeal, then I think these things all take
So
place. Now, the
so
restrictions may apply regardless.
the warning is not imposed prior to some notification to the business with an opportunity to appeal.
Exactly. And then
Okay,
they
so
say that businesses have the ability to appeal. Once submitted, we will re-review the profile and any additional context that was provided, and we will share the status of our review once we determine whether the restrictions should be removed. Now, there's two issues here. One you mentioned, which is false positives and identifying fake reviews. Now, at scale, I don't think it should be that hard, but it
right.
turns out that Google fails a fair bit. And the other is how good is Google going to be at implementing the appeal process, right? With business suspension appeals, which are much more critical to a business, those things when they get short staffed or whatever, I don't know what happens, but they originally we said, it's 3 days, but these have stretched out oftentimes to months for the review. So we don't know whether this review will be really quick or not. Now, it's a lower impact than a suspension, but it's certainly, and not being able to get new reviews, if there's no notice of it, probably sends a signal to the business, not to consumers. But if all the reviews disappear, or if all the reviews disappear and there's this badge of shame, that could be deleterious to the long-term
Oh,
reputation
completely.
of the business, right?
Completely.
But as we've seen, a lot of people don't dig into reviews, so it depends.
Well, but I mean,
bit,
a completely missing review corpus on a GBP is going to be very detrimental because
right.
People are looking at a minimum for star ratings and review counts.
Correct. Right.
And if they see nothing, chances are they're not going to consider that business unless
at least for the duration of the penalty, right?
Right.
And it is clear that these penalties are time limited. Now, I don't know what will happen if a business persists and gets caught multiple times. I mean, will it ultimately lead to a suspension? And certainly there's discussion online whether this will lead to 5-star fake review attacks in an effort to get the reviews shut off or to get the reviews unpublished for a period of time.
That's right. I mean, would a review attack trigger this? And then how is a person going to be able to prove that they weren't responsible for the,
right.
I mean, that it creates an interesting and ironic situation where review attacks historically have been critical reviews, negative reviews, or review hostage taking, right? And you pay us money or we're going to flood your thing with the bad reviews. Now, a bunch of good reviews that are suspicious could be used by fraudsters to take a profile down.
Although we have seen positive review attacks in the past, historically, a lot of them were in hotels in Southeast Asia. And we think that the reason behind them was to garner reviewer cred, so that as the reviewers left more and more reviews, fake reviews on hotels, and that Google let through, that that Google's rating of that reviewer, by virtue of having left a number of reviews, would go up. So we think that we've seen positive review attacks. We don't know quite what their role is, but we suspect it was to build credibility within the Google ranking system.
So this turns out not to be as kind of potentially disastrous as I thought it might be if they were just making an algorithmic decision and then putting this warning on the profile. It appears there is a process here with notification and some sort of redress on the part of the business owner.
But the business owner needs to take the redress seriously. They need to provide additional information that exonerates them. And what Google asks is, please explain in detail why you believe your listing has not violated our fake engagement policy and should not be subject to the restrictions. And so they have to come up with some compelling actual reason there that Google is going to accept. And if applicable, please attach copies of documents, emails, images to help our team evaluate your request. In other words, maybe you want to even show invoices or interactions with those customers.
Yeah, it's probably pretty burdensome for the average small business owner to do.
But it will be interesting to see. Again, this is a UK test. If it works as they work out the bugs, it is likely, in my opinion, that it will extend more broadly. Although somebody said on the Twitter channel the other day, if it goes out, it takes place in India, there'll be no reviews in India. They'll all be gone. So,
well, it's good that Google's taking stronger action. In contrast to
a day late and a dollar short, as the saying goes. I mean, we've been asking for this since 2012 or 2010. I can't remember the first time this came up in conversation, and they avoided it as long as humanly possible.
But I mean,
now they're under government oversight, so maybe they can't avoid it anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's what I speculated, that the DSA, even though the UK is not part of the European Union anymore, the DSA might be in the background here, because the review fraud is one of the sort of types of disinformation, misinformation that needs to be moderated.
And businesses are given an opportunity to dispute moderation decisions under the DMA. And so I think this could, by doing it in Europe, they're getting a situation that's technically close to Europe without it impacting their compliance in Europe. And so they can get the bugs worked out, roll it out to Europe if it's compliant, and
then the U.S. probably, or North America more broadly.
Right.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.